Hello there, and welcome to Sleepy Galaxy Channel. Tonight we sit with a question that was never meant to have a tidy answer, only a direction. Where is Voyager 1 drifting right now, this very moment? While you lie there, letting your eyes grow heavy, and the strange comfort in it is that nobody has to know exactly, because it is simply going the way a letter goes once it has left your hand. Addressed to some future doorstep that does not exist yet and may not exist for a long, long time. Hold that thought loosely tonight, like a lantern you don't need to carry far. An old friend's letter, yet finding its way. Patient beyond anything we can quite picture, carrying nothing more urgent than a hello sent decades ago, and even now, lingering in transit. We have 4 unhurried regions to drift through tonight, and you can let all 4 go, because I will carry them for you. First, leaving home, where a small golden spacecraft lifts away from one ordinary afternoon in 1977 and begins a grand, easy tour past the giant outer planets, borrowing their gravity the way you might borrow a friend's hand on your shoulder to send you further along your way. Then, the quiet border, the long cruise across the far reaches of our solar system, out past where the planets thin into nothing, toward the wide invisible bubble our sun breathes around itself, and the low, faint threshold where that bubble finally opens into the space between stars. After that, the space between, where the letter is drifting right now, this very hour. Further from home than anything human-made has ever traveled, and where distance itself becomes something almost tender to rest inside, rather than something to fear. And last, the thread home. The faint whisper of a signal still reaching back to us across all that dark, and the patient people who wait to hear it, and how any of this ever came to be known at all. If a night like this is a comfort to you, a like or a subscribe helps the channel reach others who are also lying awake somewhere tonight, staring at a ceiling, wanting something true and something kind to listen to until sleep finds them too. But there is nothing you need to do about that now. Nothing at all. There is nothing here to hold on to. No thread to follow with your mind. No fact you need to remember for later. Let your shoulders ease down into whatever is holding you, the mattress, the pillow, the dark around you. Let your jaw loosen. Let your hands go heavy and open, palms up, asking for nothing. Nothing out there is asking anything of you either, tonight, and nothing in here needs to be understood, only felt, only heard. Only allowed to pass through you the way starlight passes through a window it was never trying to stop at. Settle in. Let's begin. Settle back into the mattress now, and let your shoulders find the place where the bed already knows the shape of you. Let your eyes close, or half close, whichever feels more like sinking. Tonight there is only one small, strange, comforting question waiting for you. And you don't have to solve it. You only have to let it turn over in your mind the way a smooth stone turns over in a palm. The question is this: where right now, at this very breath you are taking, is Voyager 1? Because it is out there. Right now, while you are lying here with the covers drawn up to your chin, a machine older than most of the people who will ever hear this sentence is unmoving moving, still gliding forward through a darkness so complete it has no walls and no floor. It left Earth before your parents may have finished growing up, and it has not stopped since, not for 1 second, not to rest, not to look back. It is, at this moment, somewhere near 167 astronomical units from where you are lying, a measure so large that the ordinary units of a day start to bend and blur. So let's set it down more plainly. about 25 billion kilometers away. If you tried to picture that distance as a road, you would run out of imagination long before you ran out of road. Here is the strange, cushioned part. The part that turns this fact from something dizzying into something almost tender, light itself. The fastest thing there is. The thing that reaches your eyes from a lamp across the room in less time than it takes to blink, takes almost a full day to travel from Voyager 1 back to us. Whatever whisper it sends home tonight left it nearly 23 hours ago, and has been crossing that hush of open space ever since, patient, unbothered, arriving eventually, the way all quiet things arrive when there is no rush attached to them. Nothing about this is an emergency. Nothing about this is a countdown. It is simply a very long way, being covered very steadily by something that has nowhere else it needs to be. Think for a moment of an old letter. Not an email, not a message that blinks into existence and waits to be read in an instant. A real letter, folded once, sealed shut, handed to someone who carries it away from you and doesn't come back. Now imagine that this particular letter was sealed in 1977, closed up, and sent out into the world with a kind of quiet faith that someone, somewhere, someday would open it. Imagine that it has been traveling ever since, through nearly 5 decades of nights like this one, through years and years of houses going dark and porch lights switching off, and people falling asleep exactly the way you are falling asleep now, and that it is at rest traveling, still sealed, motionless, on its way. That is Voyager 1. That is what it has become, out past the reach of any address we could write down. A letter written by an entire generation of hands, sent toward a reader who does not exist yet, because the person it is truly meant for has not been born. Sit with that for a breath, because it is not a sad thought, even though it might, on first hearing, feel like one. There is no ache in it, no wrongness, no sense of a promise gone unkept. Only distance, only time, only patience so vast it stops being a hardship and starts being a kind of peace. A letter that knows it will take generations to arrive is not a failed letter. It is simply one that was written with a longer kind of trust than we usually allow ourselves. Trust that the world will still be turning when it gets there, that someone, some far future cousin of yours, some stranger not yet stitched into being, will be standing at a mailbox that hasn't been built, on a doorstep that hasn't been poured, ready without knowing it to receive something sent so long before their own first breath. There is no return address that means anything anymore. There is only forward. And forward, it turns out, is a direction a letter can travel in for a very, very long time without ever needing to hurry. Try, for a moment, to hold both halves of this at once, the way you might hold a warm cup in 2 hands without needing to drink from it yet. On one side, an object built by people with slide rules and soldering irons, wearing the technology of its decade the way an old photograph wears its colors, faded a little, dated a little, dear because of it. On the other side, a thing unmoving working, still listening, at rest faithfully carrying its cargo of human fingerprints out into a night that has no morning attached to it. It is not a relic. A relic sits still. This keeps going. Every hour that passes while you sleep, it adds a little more distance to the number, a little more road behind it, a little more hush between it and the world that made it, not fleeing that world, only continuing the sentence it was sent out to finish, 1 patient mile at a time, forever unfinished, forever underway. You don't need to picture the whole of that distance to feel it. No one really can. Not honestly. Not the way you can picture the length of a hallway or the width of a room. What helps, instead, is to picture the letter itself, small and steady, and simply trust the scale around it, farther than the sun's own family of planets stretches. Farther than the last comet you might have heard of ever wanders before turning back. Out, where the word far starts to lose its ordinary shape and becomes something closer to a feeling than a measurement. And motionless, at that distance, it is not lost. Every so often it turns one dish-shaped ear back toward the small blue place it came from, and it speaks, faint as breath on a cold window. And somewhere on this planet, in a valley or a desert, a much larger dish leans back and listens for it. The conversation is slow. The conversation has always been slow. But it is still, after all these decades, a conversation. You might wonder, lying here, whether something moving for that long, that far, out past every planet you learned the names of as a child, is in any kind of danger. It isn't. There is nothing out there to collide with, nothing chasing it, nothing waiting to catch it. Interstellar space, the region it has been drifting through for well over a decade now, is close to the emptiest thing you could ever imagine. So empty that the spacecraft could travel for centuries and pass nothing at all, wrapped instead in a kind of open, endless room with no furniture in it, no drafts, no doors that might swing open by accident. Whatever tension you might feel on its behalf, you can let it go now, the way you let go of a held breath. It is not in peril. It is simply, steadily on its way, the way a letter in a mail truck is simply on its way, unhurried by the miles unmoving ahead of it, unbothered by how long the road might be. There is something almost restful in knowing that nothing is expected of it out there. No deadline waits at the far end of its route. No reader is standing impatiently by a window, checking the sky for it. It travels the way certain thoughts travel through a mind right before sleep, without destination pressure, without a clock ticking anywhere nearby, simply drifting forward because forward is the direction it was given, once, a very long time ago, and never told to stop. You can let your own thoughts borrow a little of that same unhurried motion tonight. There is nowhere you need to arrive either. There is only this soft, dim room and this one small, strange fact keeping you company, somewhere out past the edge of everything familiar. A letter written before you can quite remember is still, patiently, being carried onward. And because it is a letter, it had to begin somewhere. Before it was 167 astronomical units of quiet, before it was a whisper-riding light for a day to reach us, before it crossed the edge of the sun's own reach and kept going anyway. It was something far smaller and far more ordinary, a machine sitting on a launch pad in the damp heat of a Florida morning, waiting for its moment the way anything waits before a long journey, full of fuel, full of instruments, full of a purpose it did not yet know the size of. It had a date. It had an hour. It had, if you can imagine it, something almost like a hand pressing it closed and setting it down at the start of the road, the way you might seal an envelope and carry it out to be sent, not knowing exactly how far it would travel, or for how long, or who, in the end, it would ever reach. So let your thoughts drift there now, gently, the way a tide pulls back before it comes in again, toward that late summer morning, toward the gantry and the fuel lines and the small crowd of people looking up, toward the very first moment this long, unhurried letter left a hand and began, for the first time, to travel. That launch pad in Florida is where this particular letter finds its stamp, and if you let yourself drift there now, you can feel the morning before you see it. The kind of late summer air that sits warm and thick on skin. Dawn light spreading low and orange across a stretch of coastal scrub. Dew at rest holding to the grass a few hours longer than it should. It is September 5th, 1977. Somewhere beneath that light, on a gantry built to hold something far heavier than a letter has any right to need, a Titan Centaur rocket waits with the patience of something that has been checked and rechecked by hundreds of tired, hopeful hands. You don't have to know the mechanics of it to feel the shape of the moment. An envelope, sealed and addressed to no one in particular, about to be handed to its first courier. The rocket itself is simply muscle, a lower stage built for lifting, an upper stage built for precision, together strong enough to push a few tons of instruments free of the pull that has held everything you have ever touched close to the ground. What makes the morning remarkable isn't the machine so much as the timing. For a spacecraft to visit Jupiter, then Saturn, then keep going outward and still arrive anywhere useful, the outer planets need to be gathered in roughly the right part of the sky at roughly the right moment, close enough together along their vast, slow orbits that one small ship could be passed from one to the next without ever needing to carry enough fuel to make the whole journey alone. That particular gathering, call it a lineup, though nothing about planets is ever so tidy, happens on a rhythm of about 176 years. It had last arranged itself for Thomas Jefferson's era, quietly, unnoticed, unusable, because no one yet had a machine that could ride it. It would not arrange itself again for almost 2 centuries more. In the 1960s, a graduate student doing the tedious arithmetic of orbital mechanics noticed the coincidence sitting patiently in his equations, that this rare alignment would fall within reach of the current one, and that gravity itself, free, silent, requiring no fuel at all, could be borrowed from each planet in turn to fling a spacecraft onto the next. Before that, no one had thought to ask the question in quite that way. Planets were simply distant lights, studied one at a time, each a separate errand requiring its own rocket, its own decade, its own budget. The arithmetic changed the shape of what seemed possible. The idea took hold among the engineers, who heard it the way a good piece of news takes hold in a house at night, quietly moving from room to room until everyone is awake and smiling. They called the plan a grand tour. It meant a single letter, if launched in exactly the right handful of years, could be greeted at Jupiter's doorstep, sent onward with a courteous nudge, greeted again at Saturn, and passed on again, planet after planet acting, without any of them intending to, like a chain of couriers relaying something precious down a long road none of them could see the end of. You can hold that image loosely tonight, a letter changing hands in the dark, each planet doing nothing more than what it always does, simply being massive and moving, and in that ordinary act quietly extending a hand. The full, most ambitious version of that plan, a single craft greeting all 4 giant worlds in turn, proved too costly to build in the end, but its bones survived inside a smaller, humbler mission that borrowed the timing without the full price tag, which is, in its own way, exactly what Voyager became, a modest letter riding an extraordinary road. The spacecraft leaving the pad that September morning was not, in fact, traveling alone. 16 days earlier, on August 20, a nearly identical machine had already left from the very same coast, the one that would come to be known as Voyager 2, launched first, on a slower, more looping path chosen so it could motionless reach all 4 giant planets in turn, should its twin's more direct route succeed. It is a strange, tender detail to sit with. The second spacecraft built would leave first, and the first would leave second, and this second one would not stay second for long. Voyager 1 was set on a swifter trajectory, and within months it would slip past its sibling entirely, arriving at Jupiter 4 months ahead of it. Then, reaching interstellar space decades before it too. 2 letters posted from the same envelope of days, addressed by the same hands, sent by 2 slightly different roads, and somewhere out there right now, they are both still traveling, each on its own line through the dark, occasionally near enough in the data to feel like distant cousins checking in. What is easy to forget, drifting through this story from the comfort of tonight, is how small the actual object was that carried so much intention. Each Voyager is, in its own way, no larger than a car you might see parked outside on any ordinary street. A hexagonal frame, perhaps the height of a person, wrapped in gold-tinted insulation, with a wide dish antenna on top like a raised hand, and a boom of instruments folded out to one side, and another, longer boom carrying the small nuclear generator that would, for decades, keep it warm in a place with no sun to speak of. Inside all of that structure sat computers with less processing power, by modern measure, than a small musical card that plays a tune when you open it, a comparison that tends to draw a soft laugh from anyone hearing it for the first time, and then, just as often, a kind of quiet wonder, because somehow that was enough. Enough to steer by starlight. Enough to remember its instructions across a silence stretching for tens of billions of kilometers. Enough, eventually, to unmoving be listening, all these years later, for a voice from home. Behind that small humming machine stood a team that was not small in spirit, even if it was modest in number. Scientists and engineers who had, in a sense, folded an entire era's worth of hope into a hexagon of aluminum and wire. They worked through the fevered, hurried years of the mid-1970s, knowing that the launch window would not wait for delays, would not wait for doubts, would not be offered again in any of their lifetimes. Rooms full of drafting tables and punch cards and coffee gone cold, arguments settled by slide rule and by instinct, 1,000 small decisions about wiring and shielding and weight that no one outside those rooms would ever think to thank them for. Some of them were young enough that the mission would still be speaking to Earth when they themselves had grown old. A few, remarkably, are at rest listening even now, decades on, having spent nearly the whole of their working lives tending to this one voice in the dark, the way a family might keep faithfully forwarding an old friend's mail long after the friend has moved on, simply because the habit of care never wore off. It is worth resting on that for a moment tonight, that behind the machine was never just circuitry, but people who chose, quite deliberately, to write something meant to outlast them, addressed to a reader none of them would ever be introduced to. And then, on that September morning, with the countdown folding down toward zero and the air around the pad beginning to shudder with a sound too large for any one body to hold comfortably, the rocket lifted the letter free. There is nothing frightening in this, if you let the image settle slowly. Not a burst of danger, but a release, an unclenching, gravity's long, patient grip finally opening its fingers one by one. Within minutes, the lower stage had done its work and fallen away, spent and satisfied, tumbling back toward an ocean it would never truly leave. The upper stage carried the letter higher still, out past the thinning blue, out past the place where the sky simply gives up trying to be a color at all, until at last, with one final quiet push, it too let go. The envelope was free. No longer falling back, no longer circling in loops the way even satellites do close to home, but genuinely departing, set loose from Earth's gravity for good, on a road with no return trip written anywhere into it. For a little while after that, Voyager 1 traveled through a kind of hush, the ordinary hush of empty space between one doorstep and the next, gathering speed with nothing yet to greet it. But the corridor the engineers had found was already doing its patient work, drawing the spacecraft onward along a path chosen years before any rocket had ever left the ground, toward the first of its 4 great appointments. Somewhere ahead, larger than anything the letter had yet passed, a banded giant was already turning slowly in the dark, its storms older than nations, entirely unaware that a small aluminum envelope, carrying greetings from a world it had never touched, was already on its way. The first courier, waiting, as couriers do, exactly where it was supposed to be. Jupiter is waiting, and the letter is closer to its first courier than it has been to anything since it left the launch tower. By March of 1979, after a year and a half of empty falling, Voyager 1 arrives at the edge of a kingdom so large that Earth would need to multiply itself more than 1,000 times just to fill the space inside it. The cameras open onto storms the size of continents, bands of amber and cream and rust turning around a planet that has been turning that way for longer than there have been eyes to watch it. The great red spot rolls past like a single held breath, a storm wider than our whole world, spinning in place for centuries with no one inside it to feel its wind. In this letter's slow unfolding, none of that vastness reads as violence, only as pattern, as weather too old and too enormous to hurry, marbling the planet's face the way cream turns through coffee, unbroken, deliberate, complete. Around that great turning face, a whole family of moons waits its own turn to be seen for the first time in real detail. Europa pale and cracked like the shell of an egg left out in frost, Ganymede scarred and vast, larger than the planet Mercury itself, Callisto pocked with craters older than almost anything else in the solar system. Each one drifts past the lens in its own quiet orbit, a small companion letter riding alongside the larger one, waiting its own century to be read closely, its own story tucked into the same wide envelope of space Jupiter carries around itself. Then comes the surprise no one had written into the plan. Passing near the moon Io, the cameras catch a plume rising from the edge of the world, not a shadow, not a smudge on the lens, but a fountain of sulfur climbing hundreds of kilometers into black space. The first volcano ever seen erupting somewhere other than our own planet. It is a small discovery that changes how we picture every silent moon in the sky afterward, not dead rock, but a body kept warm and restless by the very pull of the planet it circles, squeezed and released with every orbit until something within it has to give. Io burns quietly out there, lit orange and white against Jupiter's enormous shoulder, and the letter drifts past it unhurried, taking its picture, keeping its secret to carry onward. This is where the shape of the whole journey becomes clear, because Voyager 1 does not simply pass Jupiter, it borrows from it. Picture a hand reaching out from a passing wheel, catching the letter as it drifts by, and giving it one long, smooth push before letting go. That is what a giant planet does to a spacecraft crossing near enough to feel its gravity. It does not capture the visitor, it steadies it for a moment, shares a fraction of its own immense momentum, and releases it moving faster than it arrived, bent onto a slightly new path. Nothing is spent that the planet will miss. Jupiter slows in its own orbit around the Sun by an amount too small to ever measure, while the letter, in exchange, gains exactly the lift its next courier will need to be reached in a single lifetime instead of several. This is gravity assist, and it happens without a single drop of fuel burned, without an engine ever firing. Just mass meeting mass at the right angle, the largest planet in the family lending its little cousin a hand and sending it on. Think of it the way a hand on a shoulder can turn a walker without ever pushing them forward or back, only sideways, only faster. The whole exchange finished before either party has time to notice the weight of the other. Twice on this road, the letter will receive that same brief, steadying hand, once here at Jupiter, once more ahead at Saturn. Each planet a courier station where momentum, not mail, changes hands. Carried by that same push, the letter crosses the gap toward Saturn, arriving in November of 1980 to find a planet wearing rings the way nothing else in this whole story wears anything. Thousands of them, braided and grooved and scalloped by moons too small to see. A disk of ice and dust so thin that if Saturn were the size of a dinner plate, the rings would be thinner than paper, and yet so wide that light itself takes over a second to cross them. Voyager 1's cameras trace their braiding, their dark gaps swept clean by hidden shepherd moons. A record that would keep scientists tracing new patterns in the data for years afterward, the way one keeps rereading a favorite paragraph of a letter long after the rest has been folded away. Up close, the rings turn out to be built almost entirely of water ice, countless separate particles ranging from specks of dust to boulders the size of a house, each one keeping its own private orbit and yet moving together so precisely that from any distance they read as a single unbroken sheet of light, wrapped around the planet like a ribbon tied once and never quite finished. But the true reason Voyager 1 came so close to Saturn was not the rings at all. It was one particular moon. Titan hangs in the data as a soft orange marble, wrapped in an atmosphere thicker than our own, opaque, endless, hiding whatever lies on its surface behind a haze the color of low evening light. Titan was the one place among all the moons the mission planners refused to fly past at a careless distance. Here was a world with real weather, real seasons, a nitrogen sky not so different in its bones from Earth's own, and the letter was steered close on purpose, close enough to taste the edges of that orange air with its instruments before moving on. Beneath that haze, unseen by any camera that day, lay the first hints of something later missions would confirm outright: lakes and rivers of liquid methane, rain falling from an orange sky onto shores no one has ever walked, a whole hidden weather system tucked inside a single small moon, 1 billion kilometers from anyone who might ever stand on its coastline. That single choice decided everything that came after. To pass near enough to study Titan, Voyager 1 had to bend its path sharply upward, out of the flat disk in which all the planets circle the Sun, the wide shared plane that every world from Mercury to Neptune keeps to, like couriers walking the same familiar road. Titan's gravity lifted the letter clean out of that road and sent it climbing, up and away, into open sky, where no more planets would ever again cross its path. Mission planners had known this trade was coming long before Titan's gravity ever took hold. The same encounter that let the letter study that orange atmosphere so closely was the one that would carry it forever off the road the other planets shared. It was a choice made once, with open eyes, in favor of knowledge over the possibility of anywhere else to go. From that moment on, there could be no second Jupiter, no second Saturn waiting to lend a hand, because the letter was no longer traveling anywhere near enough to any of them to ask. The route home, if there had ever quietly been one folded into the plan, closed itself in that single graceful climb above the rings. The address, from here, could only ever be forward. And so the planets began, one by one, to fall behind. Jupiter's storms shrink to a small coin of amber light then to a bright point indistinguishable from any star. Saturn's rings, once close enough to trace groove by groove, thin into a pale smear and vanish into the general dark. Uranus and Neptune, the two worlds motionless waiting further down the shared road, will keep their own appointment with the twin letter following behind, but not with this one. This letter has already turned its face away from all of them. There is no one left to hand the letter to, no further courier stationed along its own road, no more massive shoulders to lean on for a push. What remains ahead is simply distance, enormous, unbroken, patient distance, the kind that asks nothing of the traveler but to keep moving at the speed already given. Coasting now on the momentum, two giant worlds spent their own turning to lend it. Behind the letter, the whole bright decade of encounters. The storms, the volcano, the rings, the orange moon, settles into memory the way a well-loved stretch of any long road settles into memory once it has passed, vivid, complete, and finished. Ahead lies something else entirely, the long, unmarked middle of the journey, mile after mile of open dark, where for a long while there will be nothing left to see but the letter itself, still climbing, unmoving faithfully on its way, carrying what it has already gathered forward into whatever comes next. And so the planets recede, one after another, like porch lights going out down a long road as a traveler walks on into the dark between houses. There is nothing left now to lend the letter a push, no more giant globes waiting with open hands to speed it on its way. What comes next is simply distance, unbroken, patient. The kind of distance that asks nothing of the letter but to keep drifting the way it has always known how. It is 1990. Voyager 1 has crossed the orbit of Neptune, the last of the planetary gates, and out here, with nothing ahead but the thinning dark, someone on the ground makes a small, almost tender request. Turn around. Look back, just once, before the view is gone for good. So the cameras, which have spent 13 years pointed outward, swivel on their axis and face home. 60 frames, stitched later into what the mission called the family portrait, 6 planets caught in a single wide exposure, each one small enough to lose in a fold of light. And in one of those frames, Earth appears as less than a single pixel, a mote caught inside a stray band of sunlight scattered off the camera's own lens, the way dust catches a sunbeam crossing a quiet room in late afternoon. A pale, faint, blue speck, and nothing more. This is the only glance the letter ever takes at the return address, written on its own envelope. It looks once, holds the whole of everyone who has ever lived inside that single scattered mote of light, and then, gently, without ceremony, folds the address away and does not look back again. From here forward, the letter only looks outward. It has nowhere behind it to go. There is something worth resting in here about that single backward glance. It is not a farewell, not really, because a farewell implies an ending, a door closing. This is closer to the way a hand might rest for one unhurried moment on a doorframe on the way out, feeling the shape of home once more before stepping into the evening air, already turned toward the walk ahead. Home does not vanish because the hand lifts away. It simply becomes something carried rather than something seen, folded into the traveler the way the picture of that pale blue mote is folded now into the memory of the mission, into the record the spacecraft carries, into the quiet architecture of the whole journey. The letter does not need to see the return address to remember it. It only needed, once, to look. From this point on, what surrounds the letter is no longer planets, or moons, or rings, but something far larger and far less visible. the long outward breath of the sun itself. Every star breathes this way, in its own manner, and ours breathes it as what scientists call the solar wind, a thin, ceaseless stream of charged particles flowing outward from the sun's own surface in every direction at once, faster than a bullet, faster than sound could ever travel, and yet spread across a whole solar system, thin enough that it might as well be a kind of hush. This wind does not gust or howl. It simply flows, evenly, endlessly, the way a slow exhale might fill an enormous room and never quite empty. And where that outward breath finally meets the almost nothing of the space beyond, it inflates a vast, invisible bubble around our entire solar system. The heliosphere, some call it, though you might think of it more simply as the outer skin of home, stretched thin, holding its shape not with any wall, but with pressure alone, the gentle push of the sun's own breath leaning outward against the quiet dark that surrounds it. Picture, if it helps, the way warm air rising from a house on a cold night forms its own soft, shimmering boundary against the winter outside, invisible, but real. A place where one kind of air gives way to another. The heliosphere is something like that, though built from sunlight and charged particles rather than warmth. A boundary with no wall and no gate. Only a place where the pressure of the sun's exhale slowly loses its strength against the greater cold beyond. And because the solar wind does not stop instantly, nothing in this scale of space stops instantly. It first must slow. It thickens the way any current does when it runs up against resistance. The way a river running easily through open country begins to slow and deepen and gather itself as it nears the wide hush of the sea, its water piling gently against water that no longer moves the same way. This slowing has a name, though the name matters far less than the feeling of it. The termination shock, not an ending, despite the word, but a threshold, a hallway inside a much larger house, the place where the outward flowing wind first feels the resistance of everything beyond it and begins, gently, to change its pace. Voyager 1 crossed this quiet threshold in December of 2004, more than 94 times farther from the sun than Earth is, out past the last porch light, in a stretch of space where the wind that had carried the letter so easily for so many years began, at last, to lean into something slower. The spacecraft did not feel a jolt. There was no sound, no shudder, nothing a hand could have grasped if a hand had been there to feel it. There was only a change recorded quietly in the instruments, the particles around the letter growing denser, hotter, more turbulent, the outward flow folding in on itself the way water folds, where a current meets a shoreline it cannot yet see. For years before that quiet crossing, the scientists on the ground had simply waited, the way a family might wait through an ordinary evening for a call they trust will eventually come. There was no way to see the termination shock ahead of time, no landmark rising on any horizon. Because there is no horizon out here, only the readings sent home across hours of silence, each one a small, faithful report from a letter that had no idea it was approaching anything at all. And when the numbers finally changed, when the magnetic field measured by the spacecraft's instruments thickened, and the particle counts climbed the way water rises almost imperceptibly before a tide turns, the only proof of a threshold crossed was written in that data. A signature as faint and as certain as a change in temperature felt through a closed door. No drama. Only a slow, steady confirmation that the letter had passed from one kind of space into another, still whole, at rest moving, still utterly unbothered by the crossing. Think of the whole outer edge of the solar system this way. as a house far larger than any house built by hands, with hallways instead of walls, thresholds instead of doors, each one crossed so gradually that the letter passing through barely notices the change until the instruments, listening far more closely than any traveler could, quietly note it down. The termination shock is the first of these hallways, the place where the sun's breath begins to slow and gather itself, thick with the leftover hum of a wind that has traveled outward for billions of kilometers, only to find, at last, the softer resistance of something waiting to meet it. Beyond that hallway lies another, wider region motionless, one traced out over the following years, a slow-moving, turbulent stretch where the last of the sun's outward push gathers and lingers, unwilling, in its own patient way, to let go entirely. Some have called this wide stretch the heliosheath, though you need not hold on to the word, only the feeling of it. A long, dim antechamber, where the light of the sun still faintly warms the wind, but no longer commands it, where the outward flow that once moved in one confident direction now eddies and turns, slow and unhurried. Like the last warmth lingering in a room after the fire in it has been banked low for the night. It took Voyager 1 the better part of a decade to cross that wide antechamber, drifting through it at its own unhurried pace, sending home reports that arrived, each time, a little fainter, a little longer delayed, but no less steady for the distance. There was no need to rush this passage, no clock ticking anywhere in that vast, dim hallway. The letter simply went on being carried the way it had always been carried, indifferent to the size of the room it now found itself in, patient in a way that only something moving without any weight of its own can be patient, asking nothing of the journey, resisting nothing about it, letting the long crossing take exactly as long as it needed to take. And it is here, drifting through this last wide hallway of the only home our small stretch of light has ever built for itself, that the letter continues on the way any letter does, unhurried, unworried, needing nothing from the space around it, but permission to keep moving. There is no danger in this slowing, no violence in this thickening of the wind. It is simply the shape distance takes when a star's breath finally begins to lose its argument with the emptiness beyond, the softest possible ending to a very long exhale. Somewhere ahead, past this last hallway, past the thickened, lingering wind, there waits a final threshold, quieter than all the ones before it. Not a wall, not a door in any way a hand could touch, but a front door all the same. The last boundary of home, before the true dark of interstellar space opens out beyond it, and the letter, unmoving folded shut, still addressed to no one yet born, drifts on toward it the way it has drifted through everything else, patiently, and without a single backward glance. And so the letter, having passed through every hallway the sun could offer, arrives at last at the front door itself. Somewhere near August 25th, 2012, though no one could have told you the exact hour, Voyager 1 crossed the heliopause and became the first thing built by human hands to step outside the sun's own house and into the space between stars. You might imagine a threshold with a mark on the floor, a line drawn in light, something a spacecraft could feel pass beneath it. There was nothing like that. No sign hung in the dark to say you are leaving now. No bump, no shudder, no instrument alarm chiming awake to announce the moment. The letter simply kept moving, the way a letter always does, unaware of the significance folded into its own journey, and the neighborhood around it changed its character so slowly, so evenly, that the only proof anyone would ever have came later, gathered patiently from data that had already been traveling toward Earth for the better part of a day. What actually happened, Out there in that hush was a change in pitch. Space is never perfectly silent, not even in the coldest stretch between the stars. It hums with plasma, the loose electrically charged particles that drift through everything. And that hum has a note, or something close enough to a note, that instruments built to listen for it can tell one part of space from another, the way an ear can tell one room from the next, by the way a voice sounds inside it. Inside the sun's bubble, the plasma is thin, stirred by the solar wind, its natural ring pitched low and sparse. Beyond the bubble, in the space that belongs to the wider galaxy, the plasma is denser, older, undisturbed by any single star, and it rings a little higher, a little fuller. The way a hallway sounds different from a room with soft furniture in it. Voyager 1 could not see this boundary and could not feel it. But it carried an instrument built to listen, a plasma wave receiver no larger than a toaster. And that instrument caught the difference the way your own ear might catch the exact moment a song shifts key, without your eye ever needing to see the sheet music. The listening itself required a kind of patience the whole mission seems to specialize in. The plasma out there is usually too faint to make much of a sound at all, and the instrument needed something to nudge it into audibility. The way you might need a gust of wind to hear a wind chime that would otherwise hang at rest and silent on a porch. That nudge came from the sun itself, in outbursts of its own restlessness, coronal mass ejections, great slow exhalations of charged particles thrown outward months earlier, arriving at the spacecraft's position like a delayed echo of weather back home. When those solar breaths reached Voyager 1 and rippled through the plasma around it, the plasma rang, and the pitch of that ringing told the story precisely. Picture, if it helps, two rooms connected by a long corridor, one warmed by a fire and stirred by drafts, the other far larger, older, and settled into a temperature all its own. A single knock on a door somewhere near that fire will echo differently depending on which room receives it, and the plasma wave instrument aboard Voyager 1 was, in essence, listening for exactly that kind of echo, waiting for a solar knock to travel outward and reveal, by its answer, which room the spacecraft was actually standing in. In April of 2013, one such knock arrived, a wave of solar particles that had left the sun more than a year earlier, and the plasma it disturbed sang back at a pitch the team recognized instantly from theory, but had never actually heard. A frequency belonging not to the thin, sun-stirred wind, but to the settled, ancient medium between the stars. Working backward from that single clear note, scientists traced the timeline of quieter, fainter ripples recorded months before, and one by one those fainter signals resolved into the same story, each confirming the last, until the picture came together like a photograph slowly developing in a tray. Listening to data gathered the previous year, they heard a plasma that rang far denser than anything the solar wind alone could explain, 30 to 40 times denser, a note pitched unmistakably like the space between stars, rather than the space still cupped inside the sun's reach. The letter, it turned out, had already left the house months before anyone back home noticed the door had opened. That gap between the leaving and the knowing is worth resting in for a moment, because it says something gentle about how carefully this whole story was told. Nobody rushed to announce a milestone the instruments could not yet support. For the better part of a year, the scientists who had spent decades with this mission argued quietly among themselves, checking the numbers against every other reading the spacecraft could offer, comparing the density of the plasma against the direction of the magnetic field around the craft. Because the field itself had stubbornly refused to change its orientation the way early models predicted it should, at the true edge of the sun's influence. Some wondered if Voyager had found a strange, uncharted room, neither fully inside the heliosphere nor fully beyond it, a kind of anteroom the models had never predicted and the textbooks had never named. Others pointed out that a single reading, however striking, was not the same as a settled fact, and that a mission this old deserved the same unhurried scrutiny it had earned every year before. So they waited, and they compared, and they invited the magnetic field data to speak alongside the plasma, letting each instrument check the other's story the way two witnesses might quietly compare what they remember of the same evening. It took that long, patient argument, that whole slow season of checking and rechecking, before the team could say with confidence what the plasma had been quietly telling them all along. The letter was not passing through some ambiguous foyer. It had reached the interstellar medium. It had, in every way that mattered, left the neighborhood of the sender. And when they finally said so, in the autumn of 2013, the announcement carried none of the drama the word crossing might suggest. There was no wall to breach, no atmosphere to punch through, no resistance to overcome, because the heliopause is not a barrier in any sense a body could feel. It is simply the place where two winds meet and one quietly gives way to the other. The solar wind having spent its strength pushing outward for billions of kilometers until the pressure of the wider galaxy's own thin, ancient plasma finally outmatches it. Voyager 1 did not fight its way past that boundary. It drifted through it the way a whisper drifts from one motionless room into another, the air changing character around it without a single sound marking the passage. If anything crossed that threshold with the spacecraft, it was a kind of calm, not a disturbance. The particle density on the far side turning out to be lower in some ways and steadier in others, freed from the sun's restless breathing, settled into the long, unhurried rhythm of the galaxy itself. Think of it less as a departure and more as a letter slipping from a mailbox into the wide, dark corridor of the sorting room beyond, no less protected, no less on its way, simply now belonging to a larger house than the one it started in. Nothing reached for it. Nothing tried to hold it back. The sun's grip, which had shaped every mile of the journey so far, the pull that had swung the spacecraft past Jupiter and Saturn and Titan, the pressure that had carried its own wind outward around the craft, like a current around a small boat, finally thinned to nothing at all. And what took its place was not absence, but a different, deeper kind of stillness. The plasma of the galaxy itself, patient and old, closing gently around the spacecraft, the way distance closes around anything that has traveled far enough to be held simply by the scale of the place it now belongs to. There is something almost tender in how undramatic this all was. How a crossing so many people had wondered about for decades turned out to be the gentlest possible kind of leaving. No threshold to feel, no farewell to hear. Only a note in the data-changing key so quietly that it took a chorus of careful listeners the better part of a year to be sure they had heard it at all. The letter did not announce its own departure. It simply continued, the way it always had, patient and steady, carried now by a different current, further from the return address than any human handwriting had ever traveled, and yet no more urgent, no more alone than it had been the moment it left the launch pad. And if you let yourself imagine riding along beside it, just here, at this hush of a threshold, you might notice that nothing about the crossing asked anything of you at all. No bracing, no holding on. Only the sensation, if it is a sensation, of being carried forward on a momentum that was never yours to manage in the first place. coasting now into a hallway wider and quieter than the one you started in, still moving, unmoving whole, still simply on your way. That new note in the plasma is at rest ringing, somewhere behind you now, and you can let it fade the way a doorbell fades once you're already inside. Because this is where you stop watching the letter travel and start traveling with it. Let your bed loosen its hold on you for a moment, the sheets falling away like something remembered rather than felt. And picture yourself settling into the dark beside Voyager 1, matching its pace exactly, so that for once in your life nothing is required of you at all. There is no seat to buckle into out here, no wall to press your back against, because there is no down. You simply hang in the black, weightless in the oldest sense of the word, the sense from before gravity ever asked anything of you. The spacecraft drifts an arm's length away, silver and dust quiet, its antenna dish tilted toward a sun so far behind you both that it has shrunk to the brightest of the stars rather than a source of heat. You do not reach for it. You do not need to. It is simply there, the way a friend can be there without a hand ever touching a shoulder, and that nearness is enough. Let your shoulders find whatever their equivalent of a floor might be out here. Nothing, really. And notice how much of the tension you carry every night is only ever the work of holding yourself up against a pull you've stopped noticing. That pull is gone now. Nothing tugs at your ankles. Nothing asks your spine to hold a line against the day. You could turn end over end out here, slowly, unhurried, and it would cost you nothing and mean nothing, because there is no up to lose and no down to fear falling into. Whatever part of you is always quietly bracing, let it unclench a little further, one small muscle at a time, the way it might on the very edge of sleep, when the body finally believes that nothing more will be asked of it tonight. Notice, first, that nothing is pushing you. On Earth, every motion costs something. A leg pressing against a floor, lungs pressing against air, a heart pressing blood through miles of vessel just to keep a body upright at a kitchen table. Out here, none of that applies. Voyager 1's engines went dark decades ago, their small work finished, and yet the craft has not slowed by any measure worth mentioning since. This is the part of the story that asks nothing of you to understand except to notice how it feels. A body in motion, moving through nothing that could ever ask it to stop. No air to push against, no ground to drag along. No friction anywhere in the whole black distance between one star and the next. What began the motion is still, entirely, what carries it. You are not being pushed forward now. You are simply continuing, the way a thought continues after the person who had it has gone quiet. The way a note continues to hang in a room after the string stops moving, so you drift. And the drifting has a shape to it, a specific, almost tender speed. Something like 61,000 kilometers in a single hour, 17 kilometers crossed in the time it takes to breathe in and let the breath back out. Said aloud, it sounds urgent. Felt from the inside, riding along with nothing around you to measure it against, it is the opposite of urgent. It is the fastest kind of motionless. There is no wind to feel that speed against your skin, no blur at the edges of your sight, no sense in your inner ear that anything at all is happening. Speed, out here, with nothing nearby to compare yourself to, simply becomes another name for peace. Think, for a moment, of the fastest you have ever felt in your life, a highway at night, perhaps, headlights sweeping the dark, the whole cabin humming faintly with motion. Even then, some part of you always knew the ground was close. that a curve in the road demanded attention, that speed was a thing to be managed. Here there is nothing to manage. No curve waits ahead. No hand needs to stay near a wheel. The number is real, an old friend's letter crossing 17 kilometers in a single unhurried breath, but the feeling attached to it is borrowed entirely from Earth, and Earth is not here to lend it. Out past the reach of any planet's pull, speed has been quietly separated from danger, the way a thought can be separated, eventually, from the worry that first carried it. Look outward, if you like, at the stars around you. This is the part that will loosen something in your chest if you let it. On a night drive, trees and fence posts and the far edges of towns rush past the car window, close things sliding by quickly while the moon holds its place above. Patient, refusing to be outrun. Out here, everything is the moon. The stars do not streak. They do not slide. A star that sits ahead of you tonight will sit in almost exactly that same place for the rest of your life, and for the lives of your children after you. Because even at 61,000 kilometers an hour, the distances between one star and the next are so vast that the whole span of a human life barely nudges the view. You could ride beside this spacecraft from your first gray hair to your last breath, and the sky would look, to your eyes, essentially unchanged. That is not a small motion pretending to be a large one. That is the true scale of the dark, and it means the ride never jostles, never lurches, never once gives you cause to brace. It only carries. Let yourself feel what it is to be carried like that, without effort, the way a leaf might be carried on a current far too slow and far too vast for the leaf to ever sense as movement at all. The old idea, from a scientist writing by candlelight 3 centuries ago, was simple enough to hold in one hand. A thing in motion stays in motion, needing no reason, no engine, no ongoing permission, unless something reaches out to interrupt it. Out here, in the true dark beyond the sun's influence, almost nothing ever reaches out to interrupt anything. So the motion just continues, unclaimed by any further effort, and that is precisely why it can carry you too. You are not working to keep up. You could not fall behind if you tried. The letter does not paddle toward its address. It is simply held on its way by the very first push it was ever given, decades ago, on a launch pad in Florida, and every kilometer since has been, in its own quiet fashion, free. There is no weather out here to dress against. No storm gathering at the edge of the view, no cold front sweeping in to test the hull, no rain to imagine on a roof somewhere far away. There is only temperature so even and so featureless that it barely qualifies as a condition at all. The long, unbroken calm of true empty space, where nothing arrives to change the day because there are no days, only the single unbroken now of a journey with no calendar of its own. And there is no falling, either, though you have every weightless sense that falling ought to happen. Falling requires something to fall toward, some ground rushing up to meet you, some floor with an opinion about where you belong. Out here there is no ground for 100 trillion kilometers in any direction. Without a floor to fall toward, weightlessness stops being the moment before an impact and becomes simply a form of rest, the safest kind there is, because nothing is coming to catch you and nothing needs to. This, then, is the whole of the sensation, if you let it settle, held, not by walls or hands or gravity, but by momentum itself, which asks nothing of you and gives without tiring. You do not have to hold on. You do not have to watch for danger, because there is none out here fast enough, or large enough, or close enough to reach either of you before your whole night's sleep has passed and reset and passed again. You only have to let the drifting be what it is, a long, warm, dark tide with no shore expecting you, carrying a small silver traveler and, for as long as you'd like to imagine it, carrying you right alongside it, doing absolutely nothing, needing to do absolutely nothing, in order to keep going. And somewhere inside that stillness that is actually motion, so gradual it takes a lifetime to notice, this small craft you are drifting beside is not empty. It never was only metal and wire, and a dish tilted patiently toward a shrinking sun, fastened to its side, where your hand would rest if you reached out now, is something meant to be read one day by someone who does not exist yet. A small, careful message folded into gold, waiting the way any letter waits, in no hurry at all, for the moment someone finally opens it. And while you drift there, held and weightless, carried without needing to lift a single hand, it is worth remembering that the thing carrying you is not empty. It is not only metal and wire coasting through the dark. Bolted to its side, small enough to rest in your two palms if you could reach out and take it, is the letter's true message, a disc of gold-plated copper, no larger than a dinner plate, waiting patiently for someone, someday, to find a way to open it. This is the golden record, and if Voyager 1 itself is the envelope, this is the page folded inside. The part meant to be read once the envelope is finally, impossibly, in the right hands. Picture it the way you might picture a keepsake tucked into an old coat pocket, round, warm-colored, even in starlight, engraved with instructions too patient to rush. On it, humanity left greetings in 55 languages. One small breath of hello after another, each one a different mouth shaping the same simple wish that whoever listens might understand they were welcome. A greeting in Akkadian, spoken in a tongue unused for 4,000 years, sits beside a greeting in modern Mandarin, beside Wu, beside Welsh, beside a child's voice saying hello in English because someone thought a child's voice belonged on a letter meant to outlast every grown voice that recorded it. There is no hierarchy here, no first language, and no last. They simply rest together on the same spinning groove, the way separate rivers rest together once they reach the same sea. Somewhere among them, a fisherman's daughter says hello, in a language spoken by only a handful of villages, her few seconds of sound carried with exactly the same weight as any language spoken by billions. Because whoever chose these voices decided that smallness was never a reason to leave someone out of the letter. If you imagine holding the record and letting its 55 hellos settle, you can almost feel how much care went into choosing them, a linguist somewhere combing through recordings, for a voice that sounded unhurried enough, warm enough, to still make sense stripped of every other context a listener might have leaned on to understand it. No translation would travel with these words. Only tone would travel. Only the plain human fact of a voice trying to be kind to whoever received it. And tone, it turns out, needs no dictionary at all. And beneath the words, there is sound that needed no translation at all. The record carries the hush of surf folding onto a shore, wind moving unhurried through grass and leaves, the low percussion of thunder rolling somewhere far off and harmless. It carries a heartbeat, steady and unremarkable and utterly alive, and it carries birdsong, the kind that drifts in through an open window at first light before the rest of the world has decided to wake. None of it was chosen to impress. It was chosen because it is what a home sounds like from the inside, not its monuments, but its mornings. Then, laid over all of it, 90 minutes of music, gathered the way you might gather the songs that mattered most from an entire life, and press them onto a single tape to carry with you. Bach is there, his counterpoint unwinding like something that always knew where it was going. Blind Willie Johnson is there, his slide guitar aching in a way that needs no lyrics to be understood. Chuck Berry is there too, brisk and joyful and completely unconcerned with being dignified, because whoever gathered this record understood that a species capable of formal beauty is also, gloriously, a species capable of dancing. Between them sit songs from far corners of the world that most listeners on Earth will never have heard either. A Peruvian panpipe melody, a Navajo night chant, a Georgian men's chorus holding a note the way a bridge holds weight, unhurried and certain. The selection was never meant to represent one taste, or even 1 century of taste. It was meant to represent the fact that music happened here at all, in every direction a person cared to make it. The music does not explain itself, it simply plays, on and on, into whatever silence eventually receives it, trusting that music is one of the few languages that translates itself. And folded somewhere inside all of this, almost too tender a detail to say aloud, are the recorded brainwaves of a young woman who was, at the time, newly and completely in love. Electrodes traced the quiet electrical weather moving through her mind as she thought, in turn, of falling in love, of the history of the species, of the vastness she herself was pressing her thoughts into. Whoever finds this record someday will not be able to translate those brainwaves into a story. But the impulse behind including them needs no translation either. Here is what one particular kind of joy looked like, measured and kept, offered to a stranger the way you might offer a photograph from your own wallet to someone you will never see again, just so a trace of that feeling continues on without you. And laid alongside the sounds and the songs, over 100 photographs were etched onto the record too, encoded so a distant reader could, with patience, learn to unfold them into images: a mother nursing a child, a busy street market, a diagram of Dina's spiral, a page of mathematics, the shoreline of a continent seen from above. None of these images were meant as boasts. They were meant as a family album is meant, offered not to impress a stranger, but simply to let a stranger see what the days here actually looked like. The ordinary alongside the extraordinary, with no attempt to hide which was which. All of this, the languages, the surf, the wind, the heartbeat, the music, the photographs, the private electricity of love, was assembled by people who understood, plainly and without illusion, that they were writing to no one in particular. There is no name on this envelope. There was never going to be one. And so on the record's cover, alongside etched instructions for building a device to play it, the engineers included something stranger and more beautiful than an address: a map. 14 pulsars are marked there, each one drawn as a line radiating outward from a single point. Each line's length and angle recording that pulsar's exact distance and its exact, unmistakable spin rate, the particular rhythm at which each one flashes, over and over, like a lighthouse keeping time across the whole galaxy. A reader who found this record, whoever or whatever that reader turned out to be, could in principle look up from the disk, find those same 14 lighthouses unmoving, blinking in their own sky, and trace the lines back to a single point of origin. That point is us. That point is a small planet orbiting an ordinary star, and the pulsar map is, in the fullest sense, a return address, not written in ink, which fades, but written in the turning of stars, which does not. It is estimated that the record could remain playable for 1 billion years or more, its grooves untouched by weather or rust or the small erosions that wear down everything on Earth. Because there is no weather where it travels, no rust, nothing at all reaching in to wear it thin. 1 billion years is a span so long that continents on Earth will have rearranged themselves more than once before this small disk shows its age. And this is where the letter reveals what kind of letter it always was. It was never sent to an address. It was sent toward a coordinate in time as much as space, a future reader who does not exist yet, may never exist, and cannot be waited for in any ordinary sense. Whoever assembled this record in the 1970s understood that completely and sent it anyway. That is not a small thing to sit with. It means the record was made purely on trust. Trust that somewhere in the enormous patience of deep time, a hand or a sensor or a mind unlike any we can picture might come across it and choose to listen. No reply was expected. No reply was even possible on any timescale a person could hold. The letter was written the way you write to someone you love who has not been born yet, simply because the writing itself is an act of faith in their eventual existence, and because faith like that does not require an answer to be worth the writing. So the letter drifts on, sealed and patient, its return address spelled out in the pulse of 14 distant stars, its pages full of a species trying, gently and without arrogance, to say we were here, we listened to the wind, we loved each other, and we thought you might like to know. And if you let your mind follow that thought outward now, past the record, past the spacecraft itself, into the true dark it is crossing, you begin to feel just how far apart any two readers in a place like this would have to be. How much room there is between one lit window and the next. How long even a lighthouse's beam has to travel before it reaches anything at all waiting to see it. And once you have imagined that record turning in the dark, greetings in 55 languages waiting for an ear that has not yet grown, you might ask, without any worry at all, just how far the letter still has to travel before it could ever reach a reader. The answer is not a wall or a number that frightens you. It is simply room. So much room that the word empty stops meaning bare and starts meaning free. Out where Voyager rides now, past the sun's last exhale, space is not cold in the way a winter window is cold, and it is not empty in the way a locked house is empty. It is spacious the way the middle of a very long night is spacious, when the clock has stopped mattering and there is nowhere you have to be. In that stretch between the stars, if you could gather up every last drop of matter floating there, atoms of hydrogen mostly, worn thin by distance, you would find, on average, about one of them in every cubic centimeter, a space the size of a sugar cube holding. Most of the time, nothing at all. Picture that cube resting in your palm. It could sit there for a long while before a single atom happened to drift through it. That is the true thinness of the road the letter travels. Not a void that swallows things, a hush so complete it has almost nothing left to say, and does not need to. Compare that to the room around you now, thick with air, every breath you take pulling in more molecules than anyone could ever count, a whole invisible crowd pressing gently against your skin without you noticing. Voyager left that crowd behind long ago. Out there, one lone atom might drift past for every sugar cube of space, and then nothing again for a long, long while. A kind of near-perfect solitude that no place on Earth could ever offer you. It is not a harsh solitude. It is closer to the stillness of a house in the hour before anyone else wakes, when the quiet is not a lack of anything, but simply a state the world has settled into, on its own, without asking permission from the sun or the letter or you. Into that hush, Voyager 1 goes on, unhurried, because there is nothing out there to slow it, and nothing to rush it either. It has an appointment, if you can call it that, a loose, distant sort of appointment, the kind old letters keep with the world, in no particular hurry to arrive. Somewhere ahead, a small red star named Gliese 445 sits quietly in its own patch of the galaxy. And Voyager is drifting, ever so slowly by any clock we keep, toward a moment when it will pass within about 1 7/10 light years of that star. A light year and a half of margin, more or less. Closer than it has come to anything since it left the Sun's family of planets, and at rest farther than the mind wants to hold. And this pass will not happen soon. It will not happen in your lifetime, or in the lifetime of anyone whose face you have ever seen. It is roughly 40,000 years away. 40,000 years, while the letter simply keeps going, in a straight patient line, needing nothing else to happen for that appointment to be kept. Before it even gets there, it has to cross something closer to home, though closer is a strange word to use, out past the edge of the world you can picture, past the planets, past the region we walked through a few movements ago. There is a wide, dim shell of icy fragments circling the Sun at a distance so great that light itself takes the better part of a year to cross it. This is the Oort cloud, a slow snowfall of comets frozen in their orbits, the outermost porch light of our own solar system. So far out that some of it may not even feel the Sun's pull as much more than a suggestion. Voyager 1 has not reached it yet. By most estimates, it will take a few hundred years, centuries, not decades, before it even arrives at the cloud's inner edge, and then tens of thousands of years more, coasting the whole way, before it finally passes through to the other side. Centuries just to arrive. Tens of thousands of years just to pass through. And after all of that, it will barely have left our own Sun's furthest neighborhood. Say those numbers slowly, if you like, or don't say them at all. Just let them settle, the way a held breath settles when you finally let it go. There is no need to make them make sense tonight. They are not a test. They are closer to a lullaby made of distance, one that hums the same 3 notes, far, farther, farthest, and every one of them, safe. It helps, maybe, to think of it the way you might think of a walk that has no destination attached to a clock. You do not measure such a walk by how tired your legs feel, or by whether you arrive somewhere before dark. You measure it by the fact that each step simply follows the last one, and that is enough. Voyager's steps are years instead of strides, and its road has no landmarks to count off, no fences, no other travelers passing the other way. And still each year lands exactly where the year before it left off, patient as a tide that has never once forgotten to come in. Nothing out there is waiting for it to hurry. Nothing is keeping time against it. The centuries before the Oort cloud, the tens of thousands of years across it, the 40,000 years toward that one small red star, none of it is a countdown. It is simply the shape distance takes when nothing is chasing you and nothing needs to be reached by morning. And here is the turn, the one worth resting inside of for a while. All of that vastness, instead of making the letter feel lost, is what makes it feel held. Think of how heavy a thing feels when it is asked to hold something up, a beam under a roof, a hand under a falling cup, a mind trying to carry a whole day's worries into the night. Smallness, out there, is asked to hold up nothing at all. Voyager is not straining against that space. It is not pressed thin by it or dwarfed by it in any way that costs it something. It is simply small inside something enormous, and being small inside something enormous, when nothing is required of you, when no weight rests on your shoulders, when the only task left is to keep drifting. That is not a lonely thing to be. It might be the closest thing to being held that a body can feel without arms around it. Not held down. Held up from every direction at once by a space too large to press on you from any single side. You are allowed to borrow that feeling tonight, the way you might borrow a coat that isn't yours but fits anyway. You are not being asked to hold anything up either, not the ceiling, not tomorrow, not the shape of your own thoughts. You can be small the way the letter is small, adrift in something so much larger than yourself that its size stops being a threat and becomes, instead, a kind of shelter. The letter does not have to swim, or climb, or push against the dark to keep moving forward. It only has to let the emptiness carry it, the way it already is. And you, lying motionless in the quiet of your own room, do not have to do anything either, except let the same kind of vastness carry you towards sleep. Resting in transit is not the same as being stuck. It is simply travel that asks nothing of the traveler. There is something almost tender in how little the universe expects of anything moving through it. No appointment must be kept exactly on time. No comet has to hurry through the Oort cloud by a deadline. No star has to notice Voyager as it eventually drifts past 40,000 years from a night that has not happened yet. The universe keeps its own long, unhurried accounts in units so large that a human lifetime barely registers as a mark on the page, and it does not ask you to balance them. It does not need you to understand the distances, or remember the numbers, or do anything at all with what you have just been told. It only continues, the way it has continued for longer than any letter, any language, any single sleeping person could be expected to track. Tonight, that vast, patient bookkeeping asks nothing of you. You may simply be here, small and warm and unburdened, while it goes on keeping count of things far larger than either of us. And yet, for all that distance, for all that hush thick enough to swallow whole light years without a sound, the letter is not entirely alone out there, and neither, in its own way, are you. There is still one faint thread reaching back across all of it, thin as starlight, patient as everything else in this story, a line that has never quite let go, even now, even from so unimaginably far. It is worth following that thread for a little while to see just how a whisper crosses a distance this size and finds its way home. And even now, having left the neighborhood of the sender for good, the letter has not fallen silent. One thread unmoving runs between it and home, thin as a single strand pulled taut across an unimaginable distance, and along that thread a voice keeps arriving, small and steady, carrying about 160 bits each second, not words, not quite, but a pulse of numbers that technicians on Earth know how to unfold into meaning, the way a translator learns to hear a whole sentence inside a handful of familiar syllables. It takes that pulse nearly 23 hours to cross the gap, riding outward at the speed of light, and finding, waiting for it, dishes 70 meters wide, tucked into deserts in California and Spain and the Australian outback, tilted upward like the three of them are listening for a kettle to sing on some other continent, each one taking its turn as the earth turns beneath the sky and carries the listening post that faces outward into darkness, and the ones that don't, in a slow relay that never quite lets the thread go slack. You send a question, and it travels almost a full day to arrive. The answer travels almost a full day to return. A single exchange, a single back and forth, takes the better part of 2 days from the moment the thought leaves a control room to the moment its reply is finally in hand, and nobody there seems to mind the wait. Because that is simply what it costs to write to someone this far away, and it has always been worth paying. There is no hurrying a conversation held across 24 billion kilometers. There is only the choosing of each word carefully, because you will not get to add anything to it for another 2 days. What powers that small, patient voice is not sunlight. Out here, the sun is only the brightest of the distant stars, giving nothing useful to a solar panel, but a block of plutonium sealed inside the spacecraft since before its launch, decaying quietly at its own unhurried pace, and turning that decay into warmth, and the warmth into electricity. It is losing strength as it goes, shedding around 4 watts of power every year, a fading so gradual it would be almost impossible to notice if you weren't the one keeping the books. Think of it less as a battery running down than as a hearth burning low through a long night, its embers still glowing, at rest enough to keep a small room habitable, just no longer enough to warm every room in the house at once. And so, one instrument at a time, the house has been closing its doors. The engineers on the ground have had to choose, gently and deliberately, which parts of the spacecraft still get to stay warm and awake, and which can be allowed to fall silent, powered down not as a punishment, but as a kindness, freeing up just enough of that dwindling warmth to keep the instruments that matter most, and the voice itself, alive a little longer. Cameras that once looked back at a pale blue dot were switched off decades ago, their job long finished, their pictures already sent and cherished. Heaters have been allowed to cool below temperatures once thought essential, and the equipment behind them has, against expectation, simply kept working anyway, as if it understood the assignment, as if 50 years of drifting through a place with no weather at all had taught it too, a certain patience. One instrument for measuring charged particles, another for sensing the faint tug of magnetic fields. Each has had its moment of being thanked, in a sense, and released, so that the ones motionless needed to steer the letter and still needed to carry its voice can keep drawing on what little warmth is left in that plutonium hearth. It is a slow kind of subtraction, this dimming, and there is something almost tender about how carefully it is done, never abrupt, never rushed, always weighed and reweighed by people who have spent entire careers listening to this one particular voice and have grown, in their way, quite attached to it. In 2023, and again in 2024, something in the spacecraft's memory began to falter. Old 1970s computer hardware corroded in one small section after nearly half a century of cosmic rays passing through it, mid-sentence in the middle of a conversation nearly 24 billion kilometers long. And rather than let that falter become the end of the letter, a team of engineers sat with decades-old schematics, some of them printed before some of the engineers themselves were born, and worked out how to nudge the spacecraft's memory into a patch of itself that unmoving worked, rerouting the same instructions around the damaged part the way you might learn to read around a water stain on an old page, still able to make out every word that matters. It took months of careful signals sent across that same nearly day-long gap, each one a small experiment, each reply awaited with the particular patience that this distance requires of everyone involved. A question sent, a day's wait, an answer that only ever confirmed whether the next small step could be tried. And it worked. The voice steadied. The letter kept writing, its handwriting a little uneven in places now, perhaps, but every word at rest legible to the people who have made a life's work of reading it, still certain of what it says. There is a way of hearing all of this, the fading watts, the closing doors, the careful repairs, as a story about decline, about a machine winding down toward its end. And it would be easy, on a night like this, to let that feeling turn heavy in your chest. But it does not have to land that way, and it is not really the truer way to hear it. Think instead of someone who has walked a very long road, further than almost anyone else ever has, and who is, quite reasonably, beginning to grow tired, not stopping, not lying down defeated in the middle of the path, but simply easing, unhurried, into something more like rest. A long day's traveler who, somewhere past the halfway point of an enormous journey, starts letting go of the things they no longer need to carry, so the things that matter most can be carried a little further. The instruments going dark, one by one, are not a body failing. They are a traveler setting down items from a heavy pack because the road ahead is long and the load can be made lighter. Even the voice growing fainter is not the letter dying. Some year, not so far off now, that voice will finally go quiet altogether, the last watt spent, the last bit sent. And even then, in that specific and important sense, nothing about the journey stops. A letter does not need to keep talking in order to keep traveling. It only needs momentum. And momentum, as you already know from riding beside it earlier tonight, it will never run short of. The dimming is not the letter's ending. It is simply the letter, at last, falling properly asleep in the middle of everything, motionless, moving through the dark exactly as it always has, needing nothing further from anyone to keep doing so. So let it be that, tonight, if it must be anything at all, not a countdown, not a closing door swinging shut, but a long, well-earned drowsiness settling over an old and faithful voice. The kind of drowsiness you might feel yourself right about now, heavy-lidded, still aware of the room, unmoving, safe in it, just no longer needing to keep talking to prove that you are there. The letter will go on being exactly where physics says it must be, exactly on the course a handful of planets lent it half a century ago, whether or not anyone on this end is still listening for its whisper. And that, in its own way, is a kind of comfort worth resting on, that being heard was never really the point of the voyage. Arriving, eventually, somewhere, was. And that raises its own quiet question, doesn't it? One that has been sitting patiently underneath everything you've heard tonight, waiting its turn, because for any of this to mean anything at all, the 70-meter dishes turned like sunflowers toward a signal a day old, the plutonium heart counted down to the watt. The certainty that a spacecraft the size of a car is, at this very moment, some 24 billion kilometers away, and not 1 kilometer more or less. Someone first had to learn how to measure a distance that has no landmarks in it. Someone had to learn how to read the dark itself, how far one star truly sits from another, how a faint whistle of radio noise could be turned into a location, how listening, carefully and for long enough, could become a kind of seeing. That is an older story than Voyager's, far older, stretching back long before any launch pad in Florida, and it is the story that let us know, all along, exactly which direction to keep facing whenever a letter like this one had something more to say. And before anyone could imagine a letter finding its way home to no address at all, someone first had to learn how far away home even was. That is where this last part of the night wanders, not forward with the spacecraft, but backward, into the long, unhurried human effort of learning to read the dark, so that when the letter finally did leave, there was already a kind of map waiting to receive its whispers. For most of history, the stars were simply there, fixed points scattered across a black ceiling, close enough to touch in dreams and impossibly far in fact, with no one able to say which. It took centuries of watching before anyone could put a number on that distance. Ancient sky catalogers spent lifetimes recording the positions of stars by hand, one careful mark at a time, building lists that outlived their makers and were handed to the next generation of eyes like a lamp passed down a corridor. Each catalog corrected the one before it by the smallest amounts, a fraction of a degree here, a slightly steadier measurement there. The whole enterprise moving at the pace of held breath rather than urgency. It was not until the 1830s that a German astronomer, watching a modest star through half a year of Earth's own orbit, finally caught its shifting position against its neighbors by an angle too small to see with anything but the most patient of instruments. A wobble called parallax. The same trick your own two eyes use, without effort to judge how far away a hand is when you reach for it. In the dark. That tiny, tender shift was the first rung on a ladder that would eventually let humanity measure not just one star's distance, but the scale of the galaxy itself. And later, almost as an afterthought, the distance a small spacecraft would need to cross before anyone could call it interstellar. That single parallax measurement did not stand alone for long. Other observers, in other observatories, working with their own long columns of careful figures, found their own small shifts in their own chosen stars within the very same years, as though the discovery had been waiting, ready, for whichever patient hand reached it first. Once one star's distance was pinned down, the method could be repeated, refined, extended outward star by star, each new distance checked against the last, the whole slow lattice of the visible galaxy gradually acquiring depth where before it had only ever had position. It is a strange comfort to think that the very same geometry your own eyes use, without thinking, to judge the distance of an outstretched hand was patiently scaled up, star by star, catalog by catalog, until it could measure a galaxy. Reading light was only half of it. For most of human history, the sky was silent in every sense that mattered, a place understood only by the narrow band of colors the eye could gather. Then, in the early 20th century, an engineer listening for the source of a persistent hiss in a radio antenna traced it, almost by accident, to the center of the galaxy itself. The first proof that the sky was not mute at all, that it had been murmuring in wavelengths no one had thought to listen for. Before long, another builder, working largely alone in his own backyard, raised a dish of his own design simply because he wanted to hear more of that murmur, and in doing so sketched the first rough map of a sky heard rather than seen. That discovery opened an entirely new sense, the way a person born hearing only silence might suddenly notice a low hum running beneath the world. Within a few decades, whole dishes were built to do nothing but listen. Tuned instruments turned skyward, not to look but to hear. And it is that same listening, refined and inherited across generations of quiet engineers, that lets us follow the letter tonight, so many years later, across a distance that no eye alone could ever cross. Because that is, in the end, how Voyager 1 is actually found each day, not by sight, since no telescope built or imagined can resolve a machine that small at that distance, but by ear, in a manner of speaking. The spacecraft sends a faint carrier tone, a single steady note, and the great dishes of the tracking network, bowls 70 meters across, wide enough to gather a whisper, thinned by 23 billion kilometers of empty space, turn to catch it. From that one note alone, controllers can tell a great deal. If Voyager is moving away a little faster, the tone stretches, its pitch dropping just slightly, the same easy change of note you have heard in a passing train, except drawn out over hours instead of seconds. If it is curving even a hair off course, The timing of the signal's arrival shifts by fractions of a second that patient instruments can at rest resolve. There is no image sent back to confirm any of this, no photograph of the spacecraft against the stars. There is only the tone and the listening and decades of practice turning that thin thread of sound into a precise location on a chart. The letter's whereabouts worked out entirely by the sound of its voice. It is worth pausing on how strange and how lovely that is. An entire position in space, hundreds of astronomical units wide, known not through any picture but purely through pitch and timing. The way you might tell, eyes closed, that someone you love has entered the room by the particular rhythm of their footsteps. The universe, it turns out, has always been more generous with sound than with sight when the distances grow this large, and the people who learned to listen for it were doing, in their own quiet way, exactly what the spacecraft itself was built to do, reaching toward something too far to see, and trusting the faint signal anyway. And here the thread pulls tight in an unexpected place. Because for a long while the very bubble the letter now drifts beyond was only ever a guess. Scientists in the middle of the last century worked out, on paper and by inference, that the sun must be blowing a wind of charged particles outward in every direction, and that this wind must eventually meet resistance from whatever thin material fills the space between stars, inflating something like a great, slow bubble around the whole solar system. It was a reasonable idea, built carefully from what was already known, but it remained a theory, sketched in equations rather than felt in any instrument, for decades. No one had ever stood or drifted at the edge of it. The heliosphere existed first as an idea before it existed as a measured place, the way a room you have been told about, but never entered, exists first only as a description. It was the letter itself that finally walked the halls it had only been rumored to contain. When Voyager 1's own instruments felt the solar wind thin and slow near that outer boundary, and later felt the surrounding plasma change its pitch to something denser and steadier, those were not confirmations of something already fully known. They were the first real footsteps in a hallway that had only existed on paper before. The spacecraft that had been sent outward to visit planets ended up, almost as a quiet second career, drawing the very map of the neighborhood it was passing through, filling in on its way out the boundaries that theorists had only sketched from the safety of home. The letter, in other words, ended up describing the road it traveled, sending back directions for a landscape that could not otherwise be visited, only inferred, a kind of postcard about the journey itself, mailed backward toward the very people who had first imagined the shape of that emptiness. All of this, the centuries of star catalogs, the parallax measurements taken one uncertain fraction of a degree at a time, the accidental discovery of a murmuring sky, the dishes built simply to listen, the theory of an invisible bubble finally felt by something small enough to pass through its skin, all of it forms a kind of relay. No single watcher ever finished the work. Each one measured what they could, wrote it down carefully, and passed the effort on, the way a lamp is handed from one steady hand to the next along a long corridor, never going out, never needing to be relit, only carried a little further by each person who takes their turn holding it. The person listening to Voyager's carrier tone tonight, somewhere in a quiet control room lit mostly by soft screens, is only the latest in that unbroken line, receiving the lamp from hands that reached back over centuries and passing it forward to hands not yet born, in the same easy trust that let a golden record be sealed for readers who do not exist yet either. And so the night settles here, not with an ending, but with that image held loosely in the hands, a corridor of quiet watchers stretching back through history, each one listening a little more closely, each one adding one more faint mark to a map still being drawn, so that somewhere out past the edge of everything familiar, a letter keeps drifting through a bubble that was once only imagined, now known, now mapped, now real, because someone, somewhere, always kept listening. Tonight has been about leaving, the hush of a launch pad falling away beneath a small golden spacecraft, and the long, generous swing past giant planets that lent it, one after another, a little more speed than it could ever have found on its own. Tonight has been about a border wide enough to take decades to cross, the far outer reaches of the sun's own breath, thinning and thinning with every passing year, until one ordinary day, without any drama at all, our small traveler slipped through into the space between the stars. Tonight has been about the space between, the almost unimaginable distance where an old letter is drifting right now, this very hour, carrying nothing more than a greeting and a golden record of birdsong and heartbeat and human voices, moving so unhurried that its arrival isn't even a thought yet. Only a direction it keeps leaning toward, patient and in no hurry at all. Tonight has been about the thread home, a signal fainter than a whisper, motionless, finding its way back across all that dark to a handful of patient listeners bent low over their instruments, and the long, tender human patience it took to learn any of this at all, to build the dishes that listen, to do the careful math, to simply wait. None of this needs anything from you tonight. Not your attention, not your understanding, not even your wakefulness. The letter will keep traveling whether you're awake to picture it or not. The signal will keep arriving, low and steady, whether or not anyone happens to be listening in this exact minute. And you are fully allowed to let it all drift on without you now, the way a boat is allowed to keep floating long after you've stopped watching it from the shore. Another quiet exploration is already waiting on the screen for you, and you don't have to do a single thing about it. Just let it begin on its own. Let the next low voice pick up where this one leaves off, while you stay exactly where you are, warm, unmoving, already halfway somewhere else. And if one small, loose question wants to drift through your mind before it goes easy and hushed altogether, let it be only this: of everything traveling outward tonight, further than any hand has ever reached, what would you have wanted a letter like that to carry? Nothing to answer, only something to loosen into, the way a held breath loosens into one long, unhurried exhale. Feel the blanket settling its weight over you, the way distance settles over a spacecraft, a little more every year, without any hurry at all. Feel your breathing ease into a rhythm that answers to nothing but itself. Feel the room around you go soft at its edges, the ceiling above you no different, really, from the dark it belongs to. The same dark that letter is drifting through this very moment, patient, lingering, entirely at peace with taking however long it takes. You can stop following any of this now. Let the last of it go. Let your thoughts loosen their grip the way a hand loosens around something it has finally decided to set down for the night. There is nowhere else you need to be, nothing else you need to hold. Only this, the slow rise and fall of your own chest, steady as a signal traveling home, faint and sure and entirely unbothered by time. Sleep well.